Network and bring greetings on behalf of the staff and workers there, particularly from Becky York in Colombia, who this congregation supports, and her work there with the churches and organizations that are working to bring peace and God's good news to that area of the world. And so as we get started here, I wanted to start off with just a little activity. And so I need a few volunteers. And so Craig has already been voluntold to come up. And I don't know, do you guys want to, Giannis? You want to come? All you won't have to talk. All you have to do is bend over a little bit. All right. So, can we use this area over here actually? So, I'm going to give you each a cup, and I want just hold out your hand like that, and I'm going to put the cup in your hand. So don't grab the cup. Just let it sit on your hand. Okay. All right.
Pressure, I guess.
And are you right or left-handed? Yeah, so maybe put it in that hand. I think that will be easier. All right, so the whole game, you need to keep the cup like that. Never grab it. Okay, don't grab it. But just let your hand open, and let it sit on there. Okay. So next, I'm gonna put these Q-tips on the ground. Okay. All right. Now, when I say go, your goal is to pick up as many Q-tips as possible. All right. So you can pick up one at a time, a Q-tip, put it in your cup. Okay. But just one at a time. All right. Again, your goal is to pick up as many as possible. And another thing is, like, I'm going to put, first of all, I just want to say these Q-tips have never been used before. I didn't clean out my ears with them or anything. I'm also going to put these socks. Yeah, these are your socks, bud. I used to use my socks, but people thought that was gross. But I think it's less gross if they're Freddie's socks. So I'm gonna put these socks out. Now, what do you want to do with these socks? I don't know. It's up to you. But one possibility is, you could take these socks and throw it at someone's cup, knock over their cup. I'm just saying that's a possibility. Okay. So. Yes. All right. So. I'm gonna give you, let's say, 45 seconds. All right, and remember, your goal is to pick up as many Q-tips as possible. Okay. Okay. Ready, set, go. All right, and remember, don't don't grab your cup. Keep your palm open. One at a time. Q-tips one at a time. All right. You have 15 seconds. All right. Feel free to move around if you need to. All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, how do we do?
I think Serena dominated. Let's see here. Let's see. We don't have. Oh wow. Oh, Mason, we did well. Maybe we should count these.
Okay. So how do we? Okay. So, just extrapolating from what you're saying there, Craig. You're saying you think they did better than you did. Is that right? Okay. And possibly maybe Serena got the most. Is that right? All right, so what was the goal of the activity? Say that again? Get the most Q-tips? Is that what I said? What? Just get a bunch of them? Yeah, I said the goal is to get pick up as many Q-tips as possible, right? Yeah. So I never said the goal is for you to get more Q-tips than these guys, or for you to get more Q-tips than them two, right? Right. So you assumed that this was a game that would have winners and losers. Is that right? Yeah, yes, correct. All right. Now something interesting. Serena, you took the socks and you put them to the side. Right? Is that what you did? You took the socks and you put them to the side?
He tried to throw them at me.
So you just took them out. Right? Is that what you did?
They just went there.
Oh, they just went there. Okay, there wasn't much strategy there. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. You just threw them, but you didn't throw them back, right? Okay. Is it Mason? Is that your name? What was the best part of this activity? Knocking Craig. Yeah, knocking Craig's cup over. Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah. So, we'll get a little bit more into this, but can you guys just do me a favor and just put the Q-tips and stuff back in here? And yeah, we'll just notice when no one assumes that it's a game, it gets accomplished a lot quicker, right? Right. When we're not assuming a competition, we actually get our goal done a lot quicker.
Good job, guys.
All right, thank you. All right, so the point of this exercise is to kind of show that we are formed kind of in our society to assume competition a lot of the time, right? We assume that we are in competition a lot of the time, even when maybe we're not, right? Now, it's reasonable. I brought you up there. I gave you elements. It looked and felt like a game. It was a game, right? And usually in games, there's a winner and a loser, right? And so what I'm talking about, though, when I'm talking about competition today is not this kind of like friendly competition. I'm not coming down on sports. Congratulations to my guy up there in the Purdue. Yeah. So I'm not trying to say, oh, all competition is bad or anything like that. But I want us to recognize, today I'm kind of talking about moving from competition to mission, right? And so just to recognize that oftentimes we've been kind of trained to approach life and circumstances through the lens of competition, right? Through the lens that there is a winner and there's going to be a loser, right? And we want to make sure that we're the winners. We get formed this way, like our economic system is kind of based on competition. We end up looking out for ourselves first and foremost, and it makes us view others and think, okay, if they're doing well, that must mean that maybe there's less for me, right? And it leads us maybe into positions of defensiveness, into safeguarding, a sort of safeguarding posture towards the world and our neighbors, and forces us into systems that lead to separated and isolated lives. And when that happens, everyone becomes a threat, especially those who maybe don't think like us or are different than us, who aren't on our team, right? So how do we live in such a system? And I don't know that I have a specific formula or plan, but I want to look at Luke 4 as kind of a way of seeing how Jesus dealt with this idea of moving from competition to mission. So I want to read Luke 4, firstly, the first 13 verses. And this is the passage where Jesus is out in the wilderness and being tempted by Satan, right? Now, the way I want to read this for our purposes here today is I'm going to replace the word Satan or the devil with the word competition. Now, I'm not trying to make some theological claim about the existence of Satan or anything here. I would like to think that if the devil were in front of me, tempting me, I too would be like, well, I'm just not going to do what you're going to say, right? Like, that feels like an easy thing, right? So we can maybe read this story and think like, well, yeah, of course Jesus didn't give in to the temptations of the devil. That's kind of like an obvious thing not to do, is to give in to the devil. However, I think for our lives, right, like we get tempted by things that we don't recognize, like as the devil or Satan, right? We get tempted by things like competition, right? Viewing things through the lens of competition. So I just want to read this. I'm going to replace those words and just see how that hits us, right? So Jesus, being full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by competition. He ate nothing at all during those days, and when they were over, he was famished. Competition said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." Then competition led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And competition said to him, "To you I will give their glory and all this authority, for it has been given over to me," competition, "and I will give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours." Jesus answered him, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only." Then competition took him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus answered competition, "It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." When competition had finished every test, he departed from him until an opportune time. So we read in this passage, Jesus finds himself in the wilderness, or perhaps places himself on the wilderness on purpose, right? A place void of kind of the systems and things that make for a comfortable life. A place void of food and sustenance, of social interactions, or at least the ones we're used to. And here Jesus encounters these temptations. And there's some interesting propositions within these. Perhaps even ways that, Jesus could really launch his ministry, gain more followers, really prove himself as someone who should be followed, right? If Jesus gives in, perhaps, or takes up the deal that the devil or competition is kind of offering here, he can kind of set himself apart, prove that, I'm someone worth following. And I want to pause here just to note that we can often think of mission in this way, right? Ways in which we can gain more and more followers. We may claim that they're followers of Jesus, but maybe they're just followers of our own way of thinking. And I think this comes precisely from this competition mindset, that the more people we can gather on our side, the more secure we can be in our certainty that we are right and others are wrong. This isn't to say that we shouldn't be wanting people to come to know God, But there's a difference in inviting people to know God and inviting people to our side in a competition that we may have with others. But here in the wilderness, Jesus, and perhaps us too, if we are able to place ourselves in these types of wilderness, are able to see God's direction slightly more clearly, and we find ourselves in new situations more ready to be used, undistracted by our normal competitive lives. Mission then perhaps is not so much about what it is that we can bring to another people or how we can attract others to our side, but it is putting ourselves in places of wilderness, a place and situation where we can encounter something alternative, to step out of the rushing current that is our society so as to not get swept up in the stream that would have us live lives only for ourselves, in pursuit of our own success, gathering up our own wealth, extending our own influence, becoming gods of our own dominions. The wilderness teaches us reliance on God. It teaches us dependence and forces us into an alternative way of life. As we look at these competitions, or at these temptations, in the first temptation, the devil tempts a fasting and hungry Jesus to prove himself by turning stones into bread. And Jesus rejects this, seeing that the real temptation here perhaps is to place one's own gratifications as the sole purpose in life, to seek after our desires first and foremost, to live only for ourselves and not as part of something greater. And Jesus rejects this model of living. How are we tempted in our lives to seek after our own gratifications first? In the second temptation, Jesus is tempted by the devil again, or competition, to gain authority over all the nations of the world, if only he will bow down and worship the devil. Jesus, recognizing that domination is what is really being offered here. And this kind of influence over people is not the kind of power that ultimately saves and sets free. That dominion over others is a type of coercion, and that the devil is offering a quick way to power, which is a quick way to corruption. And Jesus is unwilling to dilute the message of the gospel by seeking power over others, which is contrary to that gospel. Jesus rejects this model of living, and I wonder, how are we tempted in our lives to seek after easy power and domination over others? In the third temptation, Jesus is again tempted by the devil, this time to do an act that defies the natural bounds, to throw himself off the temple and to have his angels catch him in an act that proves that he is the Son of God. However, Jesus rejects this as well, knowing that while this trick may be possible for him, the temptation to equate oneself with God and to prove this in ways that do not include love and restoration would actually not reflect the God that Jesus is the Son of. Jesus rejects this way of living. And I wonder, how are we tempted in our lives to use means that do not reflect the values that we find in God, thinking we know best and in turn setting our own selves up before God or above God? These three follow a pattern that I think all humans face in some way or another in our competitive system. First, to provide for our own needs and gratifications first, until we are satisfied, right? That's kind of a basic human need too, as well. And after having these needs and wants met, we look outward to secure that we will always be able to meet these basic needs. And what better way to do that than to dominate others, to sort of build in a cushion or a buffer so that others can fulfill our needs for us. We seek dominion over others and start to believe ourselves superior to others. And then in the final temptation, we start to see ourselves not just as superior to others, but actually unhindered by reality itself. Perhaps even superior to God, even if it's not a conscious thought. And we start to see ourselves in which we can pick the world we live in because we have the power to separate ourselves from the hurt and pain of the world. Our actions no longer have consequences because perhaps we can buy or influence our way out of them. We can see this in kind of leaders and people throughout history and time, that as they have grown in power, they've also grown in corruption, and they start to see themselves outside of the normal boundaries and set themselves up as kind of gods, creating a world in which they can make their own reality, in which they are always the center of. This was perhaps very reminiscent in that day and age to what was going on in the Roman Empire with Caesar. Perhaps we can also think of cases in our own world where this still happens. But Jesus recognizes this kind of power over system. And Jesus resists this. And then in the next scene, as the verses go on, which I'll read here in a minute, Jesus returns from the wilderness and sets up an agenda for what his ministry will be. And it's directly opposed to this power over system and sets up a power with system. And so let me read here again from Luke 4, moving into verses 14 through 19, I believe. Then Jesus, filled with the power of the Holy Spirit, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding country. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." In the synagogue, Jesus teaches from the book of Isaiah and declares that his mission will be to empower others instead of lording over them. Jesus' plan is to declare good news to the poor, recovery of sight to the blind, freedom for the captive, and the year of the Lord's favor, which is good news for those caught in slavery, indebtedness, and on the wrong side of an unjust system. Jesus chooses the alternative life of mission and service to others as opposed to a path that was easily set up for him to grab power, wealth, and influence, knowing that these are co-opting systems that will undermine his true message. Jesus chooses power with others as opposed to power over others. He recognizes that the true good news is not in the individualized approach to gaining his own power, but by aligning himself in a system of interdependence, where all are invited in to create a new heaven and a new earth, where the first are last, where the marginalized are brought to the center, the lost are found and given seats of honor. The lesson that Jesus shows us here is the same one that has been echoed throughout the Bible, similar to Jeremiah's call to the exiled people in Babylon in Jeremiah 29:7, where the Lord says to the people, "Seek the shalom, the peace, the well-being of the place where they find themselves, because your own well-being is caught up with those around you." There is no us and them in this system. There is only us. The well-being of our communities here in Fort Wayne are connected to the well-being of the communities in New Haven and Decatur and Indianapolis, and it's tied to those in New York and to Gaza and to Israel and to Ukraine and to Russia and all across the world. The well-being of those places impacts our well-being here. The well-being of our neighbors and even our enemies is caught up in our own well-being, and we cannot escape this reality even with all the power and the money in the world. A quote that we use at Mennonite Mission Network to remind us of this kind of interconnectedness is one from Lilla Watson, who is an advocate for Indigenous Australians, who said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." We have often thought about mission as going to help others. And that's not a bad impulse, but it is incomplete, perhaps. At Mission Network, we are hoping to continue on the good work of the many missionaries that have been sent out to do good work and recognized while they were doing that good work that it wasn't their job to go and help a helpless people, but rather that we all need each other in order to see more fully both the systems that we are all trapped in and also the ways in which Jesus' words are being enacted in our lives. Where the poor are being brought good news, the blind are being given sight, the prisoners who need set free and who are longing for a new system in which turns the current system on its head. Whatever missions we are involved in, if they are not indeed good news for the poor, if they are not giving sight to the blind, if they are not setting prisoners free, if they are not turning over systems, then I dare say that they are not the mission of God. Certainly, Christian attempts to do the mission of God have not always gone right. At times, they have been co-opted by the very systems that we've been talking about, co-opted by the system of competition. At times, perhaps they have even perpetuated the blindness that comes along with some of these systems like racism and colonialization, white supremacy. In a time when everything feels fraught, and when the name of God and the word mission gets so twisted and used for evil, it can be tempting for us to back away and to live quiet lives that don't run the risk of offending others or making mistakes. However, Gaza was brought up earlier, and perhaps others of you saw several weeks ago videos of Mennonites who gathered in the rotunda of the House of Representatives building to ask our officials for a ceasefire. And as they sang hymns and many of them were arrested, for me it was a reminder that if we are to back away for fear of what might go wrong, if we are to live our quiet lives, then perhaps we also run the risk of allowing the voiceless in our world to continue to go unheard. If no one says or does anything, then the co-opting systems of injustice and competition go unchecked, and any hope of change grows dim. There's a story I heard from a humorist a few years ago. I don't remember his name. And I'm sure I'm going to butcher this, but I think about it when talking about mission. But it goes something like this. Back in the day, way back in the day when things like buckets could talk, a boy took his trusty old bucket down to the river each day to gather water. And as his bucket became older and older, it started to leak through the cracks that had formed over time. Finally, one day, as the boy was walking with his bucket to the river, the bucket said to the boy, "Why don't you just get rid of me? I no longer serve the purpose of holding water well from the river to your home like I used to. I am old and worn out. There was once a time when I did this well, but no longer." The boy replied, "Yeah, you are right. You have been beaten up a little bit, but look around you on this path to the river. All along the path, wildflowers had grown up." The boy said, "You are right that you no longer hold water like you used to, and you leak all the way to and from the river each day. But because you leak, the water that you leak around the path, wildflowers have come up because they have been watered. You are right that you are leaky and broken, but still I think I will keep you. In some ways, this describes how I think perhaps God must think of us as we try to do mission, as we try to do God's work in this world. We rarely get it completely right. We fail often to do the job we were made to, and we fall into the temptations that a society built on competition leads us into. But alas, it is not our mission at the end of the day, but God's. And so a true sign of grace is this, that from broken earth each spring, flowers come up, pushing through dirt. And so still God's kingdom is realized even in our poor, imperfect efforts. So our challenge then for us is to lean in. Let us look for the ways in which we can join in God's mission, knowing that we can go forth in love because God has made us for love. We can go forth in grace knowing that God says to us too in our brokenness, like the boy to the bucket, I think that I will keep you. And may we go in peace knowing that we cannot go where God is not. Thank you. Amen.